Let's also talk about what's going on with the BBC. I mean, again, the BBC's ability to turn any story about anybody who involves them into a problem with the BBC is extraordinary, because they fail again and again in management. So Huw Edwards, he's exposed by the Sun newspaper, about this time last year, as basically having sent money. I mean, £30,000 odd in payments to a late, an older teenager. I'm not going to point it out. I'm going to say it again. He was a teenage boy. Okay, the newspapers aren't allowed to, quote, out him because I'm sorry. It was a teenage boy. I think facts matter. I'm so sorry. I do matter. It was a teenage boy. The reason why he was being protected by somebody at the BBC, and the reason was they threw the mental health card out there. Yep. Oh no, he's now in an institution. Well, yeah, because you've just been exposed as living a complete lie. You're a complete fraud and a wrong 'un. Yeah, that might actually make you feel a bit of mental anguish. Funny that, but also it was seen as like this was an attack on him because it was a boy. No, if it had been a girl, it would have been just as bad. Exactly. But it was a boy. Anyway, so meanwhile, he's on leave. He then gets, we're told by the police categorically there are no criminal charges in relation to this. But numerous stories fly in. The Sun have written today, numerous people getting in touch saying about how he behaved at the BBC, how he harassed people for photographs and pestered people. I mean, I've been told by someone who worked at the BBC, who I've worked with, that he used to openly be sitting there on sort of, sex hookup sites on his phone in an open plan office, OK? He was a wrong 'un. Everybody senior knew he was a wrong 'un. Other producers that knew he was wrong. He's protected because, like other famous stars, can't do any wrong. So he then gets arrested. The police tell the BBC that he's been arrested. Apparently they can't tell the rest of us, but they've got a privacy thing. Why the hell are they telling his boss? If I got arrested, what you're going to call my boss and tell me when I get arrested? What right did the BBC have to know over anyone else? The BBC bosses apparently didn't tell BBC News, even though they are a news organisation. And then they carried on paying him. He got a £40,000 pay rise on his massive six-figure salary as an automatic thing. And it wasn't until April that he left the BBC completely and then stopped being on the payroll. But meanwhile, still one of the top 10 most highly paid stars in the whole corporation, whilst doing nothing. And then he is charged in June, a month ago, with these child pornography offences. And again, no one is told about that. People only found out when the Magistrates Court actually published their list of cases coming up this week. BBC are just saying, well, we had to protect his privacy. Well, does that fly for you?
No, not in the slightest. And there's a couple of things that come out here, or three things that come out here. One, a complete failure in BBC HR across the board.
HR failing? I find that hard to believe.
The head of HR, who's on, will be on a six-figure salary, needs to be sacked because this is an HR failure with everything.
What should the head of HR done?
Well, the head of HR should have had the mechanisms in place so that the staff could report all of this and will have dealt with it as an HR issue, no matter how famous the individual is, and that would have dealt with it a long time ago. And it's not the BBC paying him; it's you and I, it's taxpayers. And therefore, we have been taken for a ride by what the BBC are doing with all of this. And if it wasn't for fantastic journalism independently coming out from the Sun, who exposed this in the first place, he'd still be sitting there.
After the parents of this vulnerable teenager had pleaded with the BBC to take action against you to get him to stop. Having contact with their son.
This shows the value of having independent journalism in this country, holding power to account, because the BBC, paid for by the taxpayer, is effectively part of the governmental structure.
And we go back to Rolf Harris and it's on a different scale. Of course, it's Jimmy Savile, but again,
it's all symptomatic.
Covered up over the years. When they were trying to expose it, it was covered up. People stopped. Those who were trying to do the BBC exposés, they basically lost their jobs, and the people who covered it up got promoted. This is, and again, we see this across public services an awful lot. We see this with hospitals. The reputation of the hospital will be damaged if we expose that there's a nurse killing babies. Yes, let's leave the nurse to carry on killing babies, shall we? Does that seem like a good plan? Whether it's police and social services and local councils. No, we won't expose that there are grooming gangs in every town and city because that'll make everyone look bad. We mustn't expose that there are paedophiles, rings of paedophiles working in care homes, which there were for decades. No, because that will look bad. It just seems to me like, how many children have to suffer? How little do people care about children's safety, their lives, their health? But before people will take action, that yes, might make your organisation not look very good.
Well, and a lot of those organisations, as you said, are governmental organisations.
Yeah.
And it's not just children, adults. And it goes, you've mentioned the police. There are problems across the fire service. There's problems across the ambulance service. You've mentioned the problems across the health service, where the consultants have been accused of sexual inappropriateness in operating theatres. In the Ministry of Defence, they've tried to cover up issues with the Royal Navy crushed depth rape list, with the Royal Air Force Red Arrows and accusations that went through there, resulting in a couple of pilots getting sacked. But that took a long time.
But it's always the cover-up that is almost becomes the biggest scandal. Yeah. There are going to be wrong-uns. Yeah. You employ thousands of people, you're going to employ some wrong-uns.
Exactly.
OK, I once worked for a newspaper. Genuinely, our deputy editor was one of Operation Or. One of the people who take their credit card. When this first started emerging, he was using his own credit card to pay for looking at the most disgusting pictures. And he actually tasked a journalist to look into all of this. And we didn't realise at the time, he wanted to look into it because he wanted to basically find out whether his name was on the list that was being looked at by the police. Goodness. Turns out it was. And you know what our boss did when the day it turned out it was? He called him into his office and he said, "Get out of here. What's the payoff I have to give you, literally, like, legally? That's it. Get out of here. Never darken my door again. Because, you're a disgusting wronger and I don't want you anywhere near us anymore." BBC seem to have a rather different attitude towards this, but there we are.